Welcome folks, I'm Livvvid. A few months ago, I completed the Generation 1 Pokedex on Yellow version using a real cartridge. After receiving the diploma on Yellow, I even printed it out on the Game Boy printer. I've decided to pursue even higher education by getting my Generation 2 diploma. Generation 2 had some of my favorite games of the entire series, Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and I love the Johto region. But similar to the Generation 1 video, I had never completed the Gen 2 Pokedex, and it was much more challenging and even intense than I ever would have imagined. In today's video, you're going to see the different arcs for completing the Generation 2 Pokedex using real cartridges and using no glitches. Before we get started, if you ended up liking the video, please like, comment, subscribe. It all helps me out a lot and I really appreciate it. I have all three Generation 2 game cartridges, and around 2018 I had gotten their batteries replaced as they had died. The first two Generation games heavily relied on their battery to maintain its save. When the battery dies, your save is gone. So before proceeding, I had checked all three cartridges and they all held a save. And I'm sure they'll last long enough for me to complete the Pokedex, right? In the first video, I also utilized the 3x speed function from Pokemon Stadium. This was an official means to speed up your gameplay, and it helped me zip through the first generation after I had unlocked the Dotrio Tower. Well, the devs of Stadium 2 must have known a trickster like me would try to cut corners. And they made it so that you can still unlock and use the towers, but you could only use the speed up functions after you had defeated the Elite Four. So I just decided to not use Pokemon Stadium 2 at all. Another important thing to mention right up front is I've decided to not do any glitches. No cloning, no duplicating items, and unfortunately no Celebi. Celebi was actually available in the Japanese version of Crystal if you use the obscure cell phone feature that they had. But we never had that in the US version. In both Gen 1 and 2, it's not required to catch their respective mythical Pokemon to complete the Pokedex. I decided to do the Dex completion on Crystal version. It gives access to most of the Pokemon we're going to need from Generation 2. But we're still going to need to play Gold and Silver to get some stragglers not available in Crystal, like Mareep, Girafarig, and Remoraid. And Crystal version has the story-based elements involving Suicune, which will allow us to catch it as a static encounter, rather than a roaming Pokemon like its other two beast counterparts Entei and Raikou. We're also going to need to transfer from the first generation games because the Generation 2 games don't have numerous Pokemon from it. The starters, a few of the fossil Pokemon, legendary birds, Mewtwo are all exclusive to Generation 1. Luckily, most of that work was already completed from the first video, so at least that helps. For my starter, I chose Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil evolves into Typhlosion, which is just cool, but it can also be taught Thunder Punch through a TM in Generation 2. A great move that gives a lot of coverage, which will be useful because I've decided to beat the game using Typhlosion. I wanted to beat the entire game quickly before I started catching. This will give me plenty of money and items to catch Pokemon. I was going to catch sequentially as I went through the game, but then you run out of Pokeballs and money. And a lot of times you wouldn't have the items or HMs necessary to catch all the Pokemon in the area anyway, and you have to backtrack. Generation 2 added morning, day, and night phases to the series. This meant that Pokemon would or would not be available based on what the time was and what day it was. There are ways that you can change your in-game clock, but I did not need to do this for the journey because I planned around the different time slots. Although I decided to beat the game first, several eventful things happened during that journey. I wanted to get Dunsparce out of the way early in game. It's in the Dark Cave and only has a 1% chance of appearing. It was actually Dunsparce that made me want to revert to a strategy of waiting until I'd beat the game, as I used several Pokeballs trying to catch it. After defeating Falkner, we're given an egg containing Togepi. We'll walk around with this for a while until it hatches, then leave Togepi in our party so it slowly gains friendship. Many Pokemon evolve through the new friendship mechanic of this generation. Umbreon, Espeon, and Togepi are a few of them. You can raise their friendship by getting them haircuts, using them in battle, giving them vitamins, and simply walking around with them. After defeating the third gym leader Whitney, we can encounter the game's only Sudowoodo. Once Sudowoodo is caught, we can continue north to Ecruteak City. Inside the Pokemon Center is Bill, famous for his transferring system. Well, Bill's been working on a new project that will allow us to use a time machine to transfer with the games of the past. Once you speak to Bill, you can now use the time machine to interact with the first generation games. And speaking of Bill, I went back to his family home in Goldenrod City to get the Eevee that he gives away. We're going to need an Umbreon and Espeon, which both evolve from Eevee once they have high enough friendship with their trainer. To make that process a little bit easier, I went to the daycare to get another Eevee. After catching a Ditto just outside of the daycare, I placed the Eevee that I got from Bill with a Ditto to get a second one. I can now play the rest of the game with these Eevees on my team, slowly building friendship along with Togepi, so they would evolve when I started leveling them later. I cannot stress how great adding breeding was to the series. When I did Generation 1, I had to play through those games multiple times. One of the reasons was I needed 3 Eevees so I could get Jolteon, Vaporeon, and Flareon. Now I can throw an Eevee into the daycare with a Ditto and get a fresh Eevee. Eggs do take a while to show up in Generation 2, and it can take a while to get it to hatch because there are no abilities to speed them up like Flame Body. But hey, I'll take it. In Crystal, you can also get the Odd Egg from the Daycare Man. It will contain one of the new baby Pokemon introduced in this generation, and it will have a great chance of being shiny. Mine had a normal Cleffa. Had it been shiny, I would have immediately used it in my playthrough because that's just the rules. In Crystal, you'll be met by Yucine, who is hunting down the legendary Pokemon Suicune. It's a bit of a chase all over the region, which will culminate in an encounter at the Tin Tower. I'll be honest, I kinda misremembered that you can get Suicune after defeating Team Rocket at the Radio Tower. I was mixing that up with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where you catch it later in the Kanto region. But it's fine because it will actually line up nicely for when we talk about legendary Pokemon later. The other catch of note was Red Gyarados, the mascot for showing that shiny Pokemon now exist. After defeating Claire, I also get one of my Master Balls from Professor Elm. A precious item that should not be foolishly used on anything but the hardest Pokemon to catch. I'll be holding on to this one as well as getting another one in Gold or Silver so that I can catch the remaining roaming Beast legendary Pokemon as soon as I see them. After defeating the Elite Four and returning home, I get the ticket to the SS Aqua. The Aqua will take us to the Kanto region. While on the ship, I also get a metal coat, vital for evolving Scizor and Steelix. Since Kanto in Generation 2 is known for being pretty underleveled, I knew I didn't need all the experience going to Typhlosion anymore. So I now started to train up a Parasect who can learn Spore, which puts Pokemon to sleep. Putting Pokemon to sleep will make them much easier to catch. Training singular Pokemon was also made much easier in Generation 2 because the EXP share is now a held item. In Generation 1, it would distribute half of the gained experience with the remaining Pokemon in your party who didn't take part in the battle. Not the worst, but also clunky if you're trying to maximize experience to just one Pokemon. I also caught the Snorlax blocking the Diglett Cave. There wasn't much to report for Kanto at this point because I was just trying to get all the badges here before I started the real catching journey. But don't worry, we're going to be coming back here later. By the time I returned to Johto to get ready for the actual catching journey, I had caught 27 Pokemon. Many of those were early game Pokemon like Sentret, Hoppip, and Pidgey to name a few. But now we can come back for Pokemon and routes we've already been to with plenty of Pokeballs and our Parasect who can help us catch them. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to break down the different arcs of the catching journey. Kind of like Dragon Ball. The first arc is the grass catching arc for both day and night. On Route 35, just north of Goldenrod, we can catch Yanma, who is a 1% encounter. Now these 1% encounter Pokemon can be made much easier to encounter through swarms. In order to be notified about the swarms, you need to collect Pokemon trainer numbers from various trainers after you battle them. They'll call you to inform you about Pokemon swarming in certain areas, making them much easier to encounter. These trainers can also be rematched for extra experience or give out items. I hadn't collected any numbers from the trainers throughout the game and decided I would just suck it up. Luckily, Yanma showed up pretty quick. Also on Route 35 you can catch Abra, who is a tricksy hobbit that can teleport away. There is also the good boy Growlithe and Jigglypuff. On Route 39 on the way to Olivine City we can find a Miltank. I don't think I've ever had a Miltank on my team and I kinda wanna try it eventually. Then there was Tauros, but we had a little incident on stream when trying to catch Tauros.
Oh my god, Master Ball! How the f did that happen?
What happened was I had used the last of my second slot of Great Balls, which was just under my Master Ball. And because I had ran out of Great Balls, the selection default moved up to the Master Ball. I immediately reset without a thought because I knew the amount of time to get another one or trying to catch the roaming beasts would be a lot more than my latest save. Eventually, I did get Tauros without using a Master Ball. On Route 45, just south of Blackthorn City, you can find Gligar, Donphan, and Skarmory. All three of these Pokemon are so cool, and I just wish I could catch them earlier in game for playthroughs. And you actually can for one of them. It wasn't until this replay that I was informed that Phanpy can be caught in Crystal version at 5% in the grass on Route 46. That's one of the first routes you actually have access to, but it's kind of forgettable and out of the way, so I'm not really beating myself up too bad for not knowing that. During the night is when we can catch things like Stantler, and apparently the round balls on its antlers can be ground into powder and act as a sleeping aid. Wooper is also more abundant at night throughout the game, although in some places it can be caught during the day. Ghastly will also be available back at the Sprout Tower. And who could forget about Little Meowth? Next up was the bug catching contest. Held at the National Park on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, you can catch tons of great stuff here. The catch is you can only use one of your Pokemon and you have 20 Park Balls to use. On top of that, you can only permanently keep one of the Pokemon you catch, which is then used in the contest to determine your ranking. The prize for winning the contest in first place is the Sunstone. We're going to need a couple of those to complete our Pokedex. But here's the good thing about the contest. You can still catch more than one Pokemon, and it will be registered in your Pokedex permanently, even if you can't keep it. And I was lucky enough with my trusty Parasect to catch everything available in the contest in a single attempt. The Venonat, Butterfree, and Beedrill family, Pinsir, and Scyther. And Scyther was who I decided to use to see if I won the contest. The contest factors in the rarity of the Pokemon, its level, and its remaining health. So it kind of works counterintuitive to normal catching logic. You want them at full health. But with Parasect, who can put them to sleep, that was actually enough to catch most of what I needed. We win the contest and get our first Sunstone. A few days later, I won it again to get a second. With one of them, I could get a Sunflora, and with the other, I got a Blossom. With all of our new bug bait, it's time to go fishing. In Olivine City, we can catch Corsola, who I always called Water Chansey. It absorbs nutrients with the points on its head and cannot survive in polluted water. Shelder and Chincho was also available in Olivine, and then we get an important phone call from Bill just after. He's informing us that our current box is full. In Generation 2, you still have to save and move your boxes that have available space to intake Pokemon when your party is full. If you attempt to catch a Pokemon when you have a full box, it will fail until there is an open spot on an active box. So it's really nice that we have the Pokegear available so Bill can warn you to get a fresh box ready. And speaking of boxes, did you guys know there was a move feature in Gen 2? I had absolutely no idea this was even a thing. Rather than constantly switching to different boxes and waiting on the game to save each time, you save once and can actively move all of your Pokemon in the boxes around. I swear, I'm still learning new stuff about the first few generations to this day, and I've been playing them for almost 30 years now. On Route 32, using the Super Rod, I also get a Quillfish. The Seafoam Islands are home to several Pokemon that can be fished up, like Krabby, Kingler, Horsey, and Seadra. An important Pokemon for another new evolution a little bit later. Let's get to Headbutting. You can get the move Headbutt from a guy in the Ilex Forest. Headbutt is kind of like an HM because it can be used in battle, but it can also be used outside of battle on small trees. But luckily it's a TM and not an HM because there are already a lot of HMs in this game. When you headbutt trees, you shake down the Pokemon that are hiding inside of it. Like Apom, a Pokemon I constantly forget is from Generation 2 and not Generation 3. And Pineco. Apparently it's actually a bagworm that spits out fluid to glue tree bark to its body. Oh, I thought it was literally a pine cone with eyes, so that was cool to learn. Then my favorite Generation 2 Pokemon, Heracross. With its Herculean powers, it can easily throw around an object 100 times its own weight. A really cool interaction with headbutt trees is that you can sometimes find Pokemon normally found during the day or night on the opposite cycle. They're just sleeping. For example, you can find a sleeping Hoot during the day. It's small, but I like it because it makes the world feel a little bit more real. Owls are mostly nocturnal and would want to sleep during the day. So when you knock down a Hoot from a tree, it's still asleep. In the Slowpoke well, there are Slowpokes. But more importantly, there's a King's Rock further down the well. We're going to need this later to evolve a couple of Pokemon. You can also get more if you use Thief on wild Slowpokes, and they'll drop them sometimes. Since I did need 2, I had to beat up a bunch of poor wild Slowpokes for the second one. Kurt is not going to be happy about that. In Union Cave every Friday, you can find a wild Lapras. When I was a kid, I thought this was just the coolest thing ever. I used to get so excited for it to be Friday so I could catch it. And when you're a kid, Friday is already exciting because you're about to start the weekend. You could stay up all night hanging out with your new Lapras. The Union Cave also has a back entrance to the Ruins of Alph where you can reach a remote patch of grass. This is where you can catch Natu and Smeargle. Speaking of the Ruins of Alph, I just caught one unknown, not the whole alphabet. Hey, I make the rules, okay? The Ice Path is visually one of my favorite places in Johto, so I was excited to come here. I encounter a Delibird who wanted to give me a present. Oh, I wonder what it is. Oh, thanks. Delibird and Sneasel can be caught at night. During the day, you can catch a Swinub and Jinx. Deep in Mount Mordor, we can find the Karate King. If you can defeat him and his fighting Pokemon, he'll give you a Tyrogue. Tyrogue can evolve into Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and the new evolution in Gen 2, Hitmontop. I already have the original Hitmons on my yellow version, so I just need to get Hitmontop. In order to get it to evolve into Hitmontop, you have to get it to level 20, and its attack and defense need to be equal. You can pretty easily balance that by getting it to level 19, saving, and giving it whichever stat boosting vitamin needed to keep the stats balanced before level 20. Before we leave Mount Mortar, we also pick up the Dragon Scale, an important evolutionary item. It's time to return to Kanto. At the power plant, we can grab ourselves an Electabuzz. When two Electabuzz touch, they control electric currents to communicate their feelings. Inside the renovated power plant, I met someone who would trade me a Magneton for a Dugtrio. I had a Dugtrio on me, so I figured why not grab Magneton so I don't have to evolve a Magnemite. To my utter shock, the Magnemite was holding a metal coat. I already had one from the SS Aqua, but needed this second one, so it was an awesome surprise. Inside Celadon City, there is a polluted pond where we can get a Muck and Grimer. The old man will even comment on their presence. I like this little interaction where it's kind of a unique area to catch Pokemon and an NPC is talking about it. I wish the series would have done this more often. On the bike path, we can grab ourselves a Slugma, another candidate for I forgot this was Gen 2 and not Gen 3 Pokemon. On the other end of Celadon is Route 7, and we can find a Murkrow. They're a bit devious and like to loot from people. The funniest part is apparently Murkrow and Meowth will loot from each other's stashes, and you can even find Meowth in the same grass patch. And in the same grass patch you can find Houndour, one of the coolest Pokemon ever, and you can't get it until Kanto in its debut generation. Murkrow, Houndour, and Slugma are only available once you get to Kanto. I definitely love Gen 2 and their remakes, but this has to be one of my biggest complaints about this generation. There already wasn't a ton of new Pokemon added for Generation 2 compared to later generations, and they put a bunch of the really cool ones in the post-game. I still love these games. It could just be a bummer when you want to utilize certain things for a playthrough and you can't. At the Silphco building, we can speak to a guard who will give us an upgrade item. Another trade evolution item for Porygon. To round out the things we can do before needing the other games, we head over to Mount Silver. Just outside of it, we can catch the Dotrio and Rapidash family. Inside Mount Silver during the day, we can find Magmar and Larvitar. Larvitar gave me a lot of fits to catch, and that's to be expected. It's a pseudo-legendary Pokemon that apparently eats enough dirt to make a mountain. And later at night in Mount Silver, we can get Mischievous. I had gotten to the point where I wanted to move on to the next Gen 2 game to start collecting missing Pokemon I couldn't get from Crystal and an extra Master Ball. So I grabbed my copy of Gold, which of course had a healthy battery that I had just checked a few days earlier. My god. No. No. But I checked! Oh my god, let me check Silver. That one held a save. What? How? I was in the denial stage. The truth was that both Gold and Silver could no longer hold a save. I had done my due diligence. I started new games on them, saved, and made sure the saves remained a few hours later when I checked. But if Gold and Silver's battery had ran dry, what about Crystal? Maybe it was meant to be like this. A metaphor for my own life. That I had waited too long to start goals I had wanted to accomplish. Completing the Pokedex, starting a YouTube channel, catching up on One Piece. Maybe the battery had ran dry on my dreams, and it was time to grow up and get a real job, selling subprime mortgages with my Uncle Tim.
No, never give up, never surrender.
Just like how I was taught from 1999's criminally underrated Galaxy Quest, never give up, never surrender. It was a race against time. I have no idea how much longer Crystal's battery would hold out for. I needed to complete the Pokedex before it gave out on me. The option I had left was playing Gold or Silver and not turning it off until I've gotten what I needed and traded it over. So let's get to work. I chose Totodile for this run because I still needed the two other Johto starters. And I also needed a Mareep, Girafarig, and Remoraid. After catching Mareep, I traded over to Crystal immediately because I wanted Larvitar to gain some experience. Pseudo-legendary Pokemon are notoriously experience hungry to level up. I figured the added experience boost for being a trade Pokemon would be nice, and it's powerful in its own right to help me get through the game. Girafarig is caught on Route 43. Its tail has a small brain of its own. Beware, if you get close, it may bite. Remoraid was going to be a bit trickier. It can be caught on Route 44 with the Super Rod. A Super Rod is obtained deep into Kanto during the post-game, and that would take a lot of time that I clearly did not have. But there was another way. Remember when I said I had not been collecting trainer phone numbers for swarms? Well, the user Wes from one of my streams informed me that I could meet a fisherman on Route 44 and he'd tell me when the Remoraids were swarming. And since I didn't have any other optional phone numbers on my Poke gear, his call came in relatively quick. I go back to Route 44 and catch the little guy. Since Route 44 is also close to the 8th gym leader Claire, I defeat her so I can get the second Master Ball. I then send over Feraligatr, Girafarig, Mareep, Remoraid, and my Pupitar back holding a Master Ball. Altogether, it took about 8 hours of playing Gold, and it was nerve-wracking until everything was sent over and finished. I wanted to give Silver some love, and I still needed a Chikorita. I chose it as a starter, and then sent it over to Crystal. It's time to gather up some old friends from Generation 1 on my yellow version. And yes, the battery is still working. As I mentioned back at the beginning of the video, I had already completed the Pokedex on yellow version. What we're going to need is to send over all 3 original Kanto starters, the Kabutops and Omastar family, the legendary regional birds, and Mewtwo. All of them are exclusive to Gen 1. In order to use the time machine that lets you transfer with Gen 1, you have to obviously only have Gen 1 Pokemon in your party and no new moves introduced in Gen 2. This is because the Gen 1 games would have no idea how to communicate with all that new stuff. When you transfer a Gen 1 Pokemon to Gen 2, they're holding items. Sometimes they're just holding a berry, but other times they're holding something like Bright Powder, which makes the holder harder to hit. Or the starter Pikachu from yellow version will be holding the Light Ball, which doubles a Pikachu's special attack in this generation. There were some Pokemon that I had that I sent over that I could technically get from the Johto games. I didn't want to make an arbitrary rule where I couldn't use anything from yellow if I could catch it in Johto. I had already put in the work, and you already needed to trade stuff from Generation 1 games anyway. Had there been interesting methods or encounters like Snorlax and Lapras were from earlier in the video, then maybe I would have done it back in Johto. I mainly sent over stuff like Porygon and Chansey, both having Johto evolutions. After a while of playing, I figured my Eevees and Togepi had enough friendship to evolve, so I started leveling them up. There was Espeon during the day and Umbreon at night. Then there was Togetic, Azumarill, Crobat, and Blissey. Now for most of these evolutions, it was easy because I had them sitting around in my party for most of the playthrough. But for Chansey, I didn't trade for it until later. So it wasn't just passively sitting in my party gaining friendship over the hours. I had to actively get it friendship. So I pumped this thing full of vitamins, got it a haircut, and even battled with it in the Elite Four several times, but it just wouldn't evolve. So I had to bike through Goldenrod City a few times until it gained enough friendship to finally evolve. I've talked a lot about items for trade evolution, and now it's time for said trades. I traded over a Slowpoke holding a King's Rock, evolving into Slowking. The other King's Rock holder with an evolution was Poliwhirl into Politoed. So I get what's going on with Politoed. Poliwag is a tadpole, Politoed is a toad. But its color design is so different from the original family, it always seemed weird to me. Then we send over Seadra with a dragon scale to get a Kingdra. Porygon was due for an upgrade, and I guess when I streamed the Gen 1 video, somebody was being funny in chat because I named it Joker in chat. It's kind of funny to revisit this stuff now. Joker in chat evolved into Porygon 2, which looks like a rubber duck. The Bug Catch Contest Scyther was sent over holding a metal coat, so it evolved into Scizor. And finally, Onix got the other metal coat to evolve into Steelix. These 2 steel Pokemon evolutions are some of the most badass designs I've ever seen. I love them. Baby Pokemon were introduced in Gen 2, and I would simply need to breed their parent Pokemon in the daycare to receive an egg. The odd egg I got earlier had Cleffa, so that was covered. And we got Tyrogue from the Karate King earlier. The remainder was Smoochum, who has a terrifying sprite. Then Elekid, Magby, Pichu, and Igglypuff. Receiving eggs from the daycare can take quite a long time. Sometimes your Pokemon are simply not compatible due to their DVs. And other times they will make an egg, but they don't have that strong of a connection, so it just takes a lot of time. You basically need to just go up and down Goldenrod City until the egg shows up. And then when you have the egg, it just takes a while in Generation 2. There are no methods like having Flame Body to speed anything up because abilities don't exist yet. We've done many of the specialized evolutions that these games had to offer, but now it's time to have a good old leveling montage. And that's why we're going to beat up the Elite Four over the next few days. I had to battle the Elite Four almost 30 times to get everything I had leveled up. Having one Pokemon holding an EXP share and then having a sweeper with my Typhlosion or the new Mewtwo I just got. But I could gain further XP by constantly switching in the same Pokemon holding the XP share and switching it back out again. Pupitar evolving into Tyranitar took the longest time, due to it being a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, which normally needs a lot of XP to level up, and it evolves at level 55. The good news is I had an amulet coin on my sweeper, which gave us a lot of extra cash, and we were going to need it for the legendary Pokemon. I head over to the Tin Tower where the legendary beast Pokemon were waiting for me. After battling some monks, they allow me to head into the Tin Tower. Inside the Tin Tower, I'm confronted by Suicune as the other two legendary beasts run off. This was a big part of why I wanted to play Crystal, as I can save before this battle and try again if needed. Suicune wasn't too hard to battle, it just took a while to catch even though I had it asleep with Spore. The thing just devoured my Pokeballs. This Pokemon blows around the world, always in search of a pure reservoir. And what a beautiful Pokemon. I still get the butterfreeze in my stomach when I see Ken Sugimori's illustrations of Suicune because it just looks so good. The remaining two beasts are now roaming the region. This was a new concept for the series at the time. You'll need to first encounter them in a random battle, usually in a grassy area on various routes. But they are quick and they will use roar or just flee battles at the first opportunity. However, we have two Master Balls, so that really won't be an issue. The real issue is finding them though. The best method I found was flying between Violet City and Mahogany Town and going into routes connecting to them. You do this because the beasts are randomly moving each time you go to a new town. I used a max repel and led my party with a Pokemon below level 40 so I would not encounter normal Pokemon in the grass, and only encounter Pokemon higher level than the one I had in the lead, which would be the beasts. The first one I found was Entei. This brawny Pokemon courses around the earth, spouting flames hotter than a volcano's magma. And then I found Raikou pretty quickly after that actually. This rough Pokemon stores energy inside its body, then sweeps across the land, shooting off electricity. With the 3 legendary beasts collected, I could now go for the box legendaries of Gold and Silver. I went for Lugia first. After getting the Silver Wing back in pewter from the old man, we can now go to the Whirl Islands to catch Lugia. I hate the Whirl Islands. I mean, this place is just miserable. You need Surf to get there, and once you're there, you need to have Flash and Strength. Then you need to know the right path to descend down in order to get to Lugia's chamber, all the while dealing with tons of random encounters. But eventually we get there. This battle is extremely annoying because it constantly uses Recover. In Gen 2, Recover has 20 PP. In modern Pokemon, it's reduced to 5, so yeah, it had a lot of recovers. It also had Gust, which was super effective against my Parasect, so trying to put it to sleep was a nightmare. I had to just chuck dozens of Ultra Balls until it agreed to tag along. It has an incredible ability to calm raging storms. It is said that Lugia appears when storms start. Am I the only one who grew up thinking this thing was water type? I sure did. It still feels strange that it's psychic and flying. I do love this design though. After you've caught the legendary beast, you can go back to the Tin Tower, and the monks will see that you are worthy to encounter what is perched at the top. You climb the tower by ascending the stairs and going through a maze of jumps that can lead you down incorrect paths, all the while you're being harassed by freaking Rattatas. How are these guys not scared of what lurks above? Once you get to the top of the tower, you can encounter Ho-Oh. I very intentionally waited for this to be the final battle. Before Crystal came out, I always gravitated to Gold version. I thought Ho-Oh looked so cool, and I vividly remember its cameo in the first episode of the anime. And the setting is amazing too. On top of the Tin Tower overlooking the entire Johto region. Come on, this is cinema. The Ho-Oh battle was kind of like the Lugia battle, because it had Recover. I used Tyranitar because none of Ho-Oh's attacks could phase it, and Tyranitar's crunch did just enough but also wouldn't faint it. After dozens of Ultra Balls, it's finally caught. It will reveal itself before a pure-hearted trainer, that's me, by shining its bright rainbow-colored wings. I've now caught everything required for the Johto National Dex. The journey is finally coming to an end. Crystal had 83 hours, Gold had 8 hours, and I played Silver for about 15 minutes for Chikorita. So all in all, 91 hours to complete the Gen 2 Pokedex. Now that I have all 250 Pokemon, I can get my diploma. But before that, I want the professors to check out my accomplishments. Professor Oak is pretty excited and he plays a special jingle just for me. Elm doesn't seem to care much. Oh, I see, my own regional professor doesn't care, huh? To be fair to Elm, his interest is not in the Pokedex completion, it's about eggs, so fair enough. Back in Celadon is where you can actually speak to the game devs, right where they were in Gen 1. After speaking to the director, he will congratulate you on completing the Pokedex and award you with a diploma. Player Livvvid. This certifies that you have completed the new Pokedex. Congratulations. He then says the art director will print out the diploma. It does take a few seconds to transmit, but once it finally comes out, I frame it. Unfortunately, the thermal paper method that the printer uses isn't built for longevity, and the Generation 1 diploma is already fading a lot. I can't even see my player name on it anymore. But I thought about it, and these videos kind of immortalize both of them, so I'm not worried about it. I can always come back and watch my own videos to see what the diplomas look like in their prime. Completing the Gen 2 Pokedex was a wild ride. The new challenges presented with roaming Pokemon, time of day encounters, and friendship were all curveballs that I had to figure out different strategies for. And the added drama of my batteries dying off one by one was scary at the time. But I look back on it now and I think it actually made it kind of fun to add a subplot to the journey. I joked about it earlier, but I really did consider just abandoning the whole project altogether. But then, I remembered.
Never give up, never surrender.
Folks, that's all I've got for today's video. Thank you for making it to the end. I have a free Patreon, so check that out if you'd like to see what I'm up to next. But if you become a paid patron or a YouTube channel member, I'll give you a shout out in my videos. Thank you to my YouTube channel members Quinn, Chris Redbeard, Brewham, Eugenia, Johnny C, Netrunner 2K2, and Joe Cuddies. And thank you to my patrons Shio, Lyra, Eon Kane, Martane, Smudge, Brooks, Jonathan C, J-Ret, Andrew PH, Rogue S, Falk84, Maths, and 2 new members, Soul and Igby the Ampharos guy. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.